Welcome to another edition of In Focus. I'm your host, Steve Hare. Joining me in studio today is Chelan County Commissioner Kevin Overbay. Kevin, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Steve.
You guys had a full agenda this week.
We really have.
Really a lot of discussions going on, and I think you have some news to share with us regarding the jail and your recent visit with the jail director.
Absolutely, yeah. Bill Larson, who has been with us since around July of 2018, has decided that he's done what he can for us there at the jail, and so he's looking to move on. And so his last day will be April 30th.
That was a long interim term there.
It really was. We brought him in initially under a 6-month idea that he'd be able to take a look at things and give us ideas about exactly what needed to happen in the jail to move forward.
Well, he came in during a time of a dispute with labor as well. I think at that time the employees of the jail didn't feel safe.
Yeah, there was a lot of different factors. There was some safety issues within the jail. There was some relationship issues, communication issues. There was just a myriad of things that, the timing couldn't be better to have Bill come in, give us a full assessment as to what his observations were of what needed to change within the facility. The organizational structure changed a little bit. We basically had a director, assistant director organization prior to Bill's arrival, and after Bill's arrival, he assessed that he felt that there would be a need to have a director, but then 2 chiefs that would actually fall under the director instead of an assistant director. And so there would be a chief of operations and a chief of administration. The operations piece, of course, the day-to-day operations of the facility and the teams that work within the facility. And then the administration piece that would be responsible for policies and updating policies through Lexipol, as well as looking at the training elements and then some ancillary programming pieces that go along, like electronic home monitoring and some other pieces that we have within the facility. And so basically he provided a 38-page proposal that at a cost of $1.3 million to make these changes. Of course, I told him, I kind of jokingly said, I'm glad I was sitting down when I read this. And but we were able to put a couple of things into place and said, I need you to pare this back a little bit, just because of the costs associated, but let's not pare it back to where we lose the effectiveness. And so over the last 18 or so months, he's been very effective with regards to the organization, with regards to some cost savings pieces, both in overtime as well as in staffing. And additionally, we've been able to do some additional pieces, both some safety improvements. We just approved a week or so ago the closed circuit television piece, which is the camera system within the jail.
Better surveillance.
Yep, and we are moving forward with that. We are also are moving forward with our mail scanner, which basically scans all the incoming and outgoing mail, for the facility. In addition to that, we have a body scanner, and that's for both the Department of Corrections folks that we house in the facility when they're coming in initially to the facility, either providing a self-report or as part of a piece that is done by DOC, as well as
DOC meaning the Department of Corrections.
As well as the folks that are part of our work program as well. And what that will do is that will be able to scan for contraband both on the person and so forth as they're coming in, as well as in body cavities. The additional piece also is the implementation of a canine program, and so we will actually have a canine officer that will be has been selected. We'll be going to training in May with the Department of Corrections in Shelton, and then we'll be coming back with a dog and training and fully trained to be able to use that canine within the facility as well to do searches for contraband within the facility, because that was one of the biggest issues one of the biggest safety issues we had was contraband pieces. Additionally, looking at cuff ports and doors, some upgrades. This facility was built in about 1984, and it was built for more misdemeanor, not for felonious inmates. But what we've seen is we've really seen a change in the population, and so we've had it's more geared now at the felony than it is on the misdemeanor. The other piece that we are facing in that was we actually have increased our medical staff with a couple of nurse positions, as well as increased, gave authorization a couple of weeks ago to bring on another mental health specialist.
Good.
And so that will assist Ms. Carlson, who is our mental health professional now in the facility.
Kevin, it occurs to me too that it just came up that the county was just involved in a recent court settlement, I believe, that had to do with the incarceration of somebody with mental health. And there had been a settlement, and I was just curious, since you're mentioning some of these new improvements that have been made and adding mental health staff, is that as a result of this settlement, or what kinds of changes that are occurring as a result of that?
You know, I will say that these were already in place, but it basically was some elements of the settlement, but realistically it was already in the process of being done. And it was not because of the settlement that it's being done, it's because we recognize that 80% of the folks that we have in the jail have either a substance abuse or mental health issue. And so it is overwhelming when you stop and you think about 200 inmates, you know, you have 160 of them have some form of mental health or substance abuse issue, which, you know, one of the factors that we face and that the taxpayers face in this particular piece is they have to pay, you know, when the inmate comes in, when the person's incarcerated, if they are on Medicaid, that Medicaid gets suspended. And so their Medicaid benefits are suspended. Now, this is for somebody who is booked into the jail. And so if they're awaiting trial, they haven't even been convicted yet, but they're incarcerated awaiting trial or whatever it may be, those Medicaid benefits are suspended. So here we have citizens that are paying for Medicaid, you know, through their taxes, but now they're basically being hit again for whatever medical treatments that are being provided as part of the budget of the jail. We have to provide the medical treatments to these folks. And so what we're looking at on the national level is to be able to see a change in that to where, you know, those Medicaid benefits are not suspended until the person is convicted.
I see.
And that way it would actually be a cost savings to the citizens as a whole. Additionally, right now, under the program through the Healthcare Authority in Washington State is one of 34 states right now that just suspend the benefits. Prior to that, prior to 2015, when we did that, basically the benefits were actually closed. And so by suspending the benefits, once the person is leaving the facility, they're able to go ahead and get those benefits reinstated right after, you know, they leave. And so it shortens the time frame so they can continue to get that continuum of care after the fact.
But still, you know, that break in care can cause a problem.
It really can.
Not just for the inmate, but for the county.
Yeah, absolutely. Well. And so for us, we're really trying to look at solutions. You know, one of the conversations that we've been having was talking about a regional diversion facility.
Yes.
And what that looks like. And so it's been an idea that I've been working on for a little over a year, talking with other commissioners of both Okanagan, Douglas, and Grant counties, which basically is also the coverage of the Accountable Communities of Health piece, is does this seem to make sense? We're often seeing...
You're looking for an actual facility?
We are actually looking at a facility. You know, how would we go about doing that? So we're in the planning stages right now of what this looks like.
Why wouldn't Parkside serve that purpose?
You know, Parkside would be able to serve a portion of that purpose, but it wouldn't be able to serve the full purpose of what we're looking at. And so when we look at this, when we talk about a diversion facility, you think about, and I'm actually going to kind of pare it back just a little bit, take it right to the boots on the ground. So you have folks, our law enforcement are often tied up with calls involving mental health, mental illness, behavioral health issues. And so basically what we have here in the Valley and have been under a WASPIC grant, a Washington Association of Sheriff and Police Chiefs grant, as well as a True Blood dollars, is Catholic Charities has been doing diversion within the community with law enforcement, where they will send a dedicated crisis responder to that scene, and that dedicated crisis responder will then work with that person to get them the mental health assistance that they need. Typically in the past, without the diversion programs, a lot of times law enforcement is tied up for a great many hours trying to figure out what to do with this person, whether it be taking them to an emergency room or trying to deal with the mental illness piece, and oftentimes coming up blank as far as facilities. The person may have committed a crime in the process, and that's why law enforcement is contacting them. But realistically, they committed the crime because of mental health or behavioral health issues. They didn't commit the crime because, you know, they were malicious in intent. It's because of the condition. And so oftentimes these folks are incarcerated and are put into a system that then our jails have become the mental health facilities.
Well, there's also the issue statewide of mental health hospitals and trying to, let's say, get away from the large institutions and rather go
Right.
to the community-based facilities, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. The state is looking actually to decentralize both eastern and western states. What they're looking to do is just make them forensic only, which basically is dealing pretty much with criminal elements. So what they're doing is actually pushing those services back down into the communities. And so what we're looking at is, and that goes back to the Parkside. Parkside is kind of a community piece where you have crisis beds, folks that are in crisis.
But that's purely voluntary.
But yeah, absolutely, it's voluntary. There are, the law
court.
requires 4 mandatory committals, that DCR can actually do that, dedicated crisis responder can do that for about a 72-hour period. But those are pretty infrequent. And so, when you look at the bed space that Parkside has, it's 32 beds. Well, you have folks that, have crisis, beds, and then you have basically folks that are in beds for more of a
You got rehabilitation.
well, yeah, it's a rehabilitation piece, and so they're kind of split up, kind of 16 and 16. What we're looking at is a facility where folks would be able to either voluntarily commit, would be able to be given a location to go that would be maybe a non-voluntary committal, but also would have a segment that would be both pre and post-sentencing facility that would be able to be provided so that these folks were not just sitting in a jail, with limited resources, that we would actually have staff that would be able to accommodate their needs both pre and post-sentencing.
Okay, so
And it'd be for the 4-county area. Miami-Dade County just recently acquired a federal building that they revamped, did about a $44 million upgrade to the building. And they're one of the first in the country to have a diversion facility. They have 200 beds. They run a staff of 23. It costs them between $1 and $2 million a year for the operations of that facility, and just recently opened. And so I'll be traveling down there to take a look at their facility, to really look at the nuances of that. We'll also be looking at some of the programs that are going on in Island County, in the state of Washington, Pierce County, and Snohomish County, with regards to the diversion program, where they actually have law enforcement that are in plainclothes that respond to these calls with dedicated crisis responders, so that they de-escalate the situation as much as possible. And then basically, for the lack of a better term, are kind of the brokers of where does this person need to go based upon what their crisis is at this time,
okay.
to
So it's
provide
like a
that
triage
assistance.
facility,
It
yeah.
really is. And so we'll be speaking with those 3 counties as well as to looking at what their program looks like. The True Blood dollars are going to soon run out. The WASPIC dollars are going to soon run out for diversion. And
would you prefer to see such a facility in Chelan County, or if it's a 4-county area, I guess it could be located anywhere?
It really could be located anywhere that we really felt would be the best place for it. And so, as we take a look at the jail facility that we currently have, one of the suggestions that was made is it possible to retrofit that facility for that, and then do we look to build a new jail that would be more accommodating as we move forward to the clientele that basically are in that facility.
Right.
And so those are conversations that are being had right now. We want to vet this thing out, and of course we're going to definitely need to get citizen input. I stop and I think about the families in our community, and I don't think there's a family out there that either has not been directly or indirectly impacted by mental health and or substance abuse. They either know somebody or related to somebody that is
Well,
involved
we're
in
just a
that.
microcosm of what is really a national issue right now.
It really is. And, National Association of Counties is really looking at asking Congress to change legislation on the Medicaid piece to allow for that streamline of the process, but also that stream of funding to be able to be utilized for these folks that have not been convicted.
Very good.
And the ability for us to have a diversion facility and use that funding instead of taxpayer dollars that are funding that currently right now in our jail facility would be a cost savings to the
A lot of
citizens.
attention being paid, I think, to criminal justice right now, and mental health for that matter. But you're also looking at maybe creating or establishing a work release program here with the state here in Chelan County.
Well, we have actually been contacted by Department of Corrections And the engrossed substitute House Bill 1109, which was passed in the 2019 session, earmarked $9.1 million to Department of Corrections to add 200 beds to their work release program. They've identified 4 counties that they feel were underserved, and what they mean by that is they have folks that are incarcerated as a part of Department of Corrections, overview, that when they release them back to their home, county of residence. And
These are halfway homes, somewhat.
well, yeah, they basically when they release, whether they're fully have fulfilled their obligation, or if they are on probation or whatever it might be, or on parole, then basically it would potentially be halfway housed or whatever. This particular facility that they're looking for would in our county area, which is actually for Grant, Okanagan, Douglas, and Chelan County, would be a 50-bed facility. The $9.1 million was earmarked for 200 beds, 50 of which they're looking to place in our community somewhere. So we've been in meetings with them since November, and they are looking, continually are looking for folks that are interested in sitting on committee. The next meeting will be the second Wednesday of March, and at the police department. But what we have done as Chelan County is we currently have our inmate worker program housing that we had that needed to have a remodel. It's in the midst of that right now. We're taking a look at that inmate worker program, and with the folks that we currently have, really will not have a robust program based upon the inmates that we currently have. And so what we did is we actually put in a proposal to Department of Corrections that say, hey, maybe our facility might be one that you might want to look at, as part of this piece.
So this would not be something where you would be placing a halfway house in some neighborhood?
There is an opportunity for that. They have actually went out for requests for proposals. There were, to my knowledge, at the last meeting, they told us there were 3 properties that did put in as a request. We will be, as a part of the committee, I sit on that committee, we'll be looking at those properties and where they are located in our community, looking at, the proximity to schools, the proximity to neighborhoods. What does this really look like? Is this the best fit for our community?
And then public engagement also.
Absolutely, public engagement all the way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, right now, the RFP closed on the 13th of February. And so we'll know in the next couple of weeks what those properties are. I asked actually if they could provide that to me in advance. I would like to go look at those properties in advance. But basically, we'll take a look at those, and we'll look at the other proposal that we as the county have provided to them and see, is that the better fit for our community? We already have all the elements are in place for that particular facility, but there again, it comes down to costs. And so what is Department of Corrections willing to pay for a facility in our community, that would meet most all of their needs.
Very good. Kevin Overbay, Chelan County Commissioner for Chelan County's 1st District.
Correct.
And we thank you for coming in. We'll let it go at that, I guess, and we'll talk to you guys in a couple of weeks. I believe we have Bob Booger coming in next, right?
Yeah, Bob will be up next time.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us here on In Focus on NCW Life.